She knelt beside the white marble headstone, her weathered hands placing fresh carnations beneath the inscription. Section 7, Row 12, Arlington National Cemetery stretched endlessly around her as morning mist clung to the perfectly aligned graves. Her dark jacket bore a small, faded patch on the left shoulder, barely visible unless someone knew exactly what to look for. The honor guard detail performing their ceremonial duties nearby paid her no attention, assuming she was just another grieving mother among the thousands who visited daily. They had no idea that the woman kneeling in silent prayer had earned decorations that most of them had only heard about in military history classes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dorothy Kilman arrived at Arlington National Cemetery every Tuesday at precisely 08:00 hours, a routine she had maintained for the past 18 months, since her son, Captain Michael Kilman, had been laid to rest in Section 7. Her visits followed an established pattern that cemetery staff had come to recognize without really noticing her individual presence among the steady stream of families honoring their fallen loved ones. She parked her modest sedan in the visitor parking area and walked the familiar path through the meticulously maintained grounds, carrying a small canvas bag containing fresh flowers and a thermos of coffee that would sustain her through the morning visit. Her appearance suggested a working-class background, practical shoes, simple clothing, and the composed dignity of someone who had learned to carry grief without allowing it to define her public demeanor. The cemetery guards at the entrance checkpoint processed her visitor credentials with the routine efficiency of personnel who managed thousands of similar requests every week. Her identification showed Dorothy M. Kilman, age 67, with a Washington, D.C. address and emergency contact information that listed no living relatives beyond a sister in Oregon. Her security screening proceeded without incident or special attention. The metal detector registered no items requiring additional inspection. Her bag contained only flowers, personal items, and the coffee thermos that she brought to share with her son during what she considered their weekly conversations about life, loss, and the continuing world he had left behind. The walk to Section 7 took her past ongoing ceremonies where honor guard details conducted military funerals with precision that honored both the deceased and the families who mourned them. Dorothy observed these ceremonies with respectful distance, never intruding on private moments, but always pausing briefly to acknowledge the service being rendered to other fallen heroes. Her son's gravesite was located in an area designated for recent casualties from overseas operations, surrounded by headstones marking young lives lost in service to their country. The location provided both privacy for personal reflection and proximity to others who understood the unique nature of military loss. Dorothy's graveside routine had evolved into a comfortable ritual that helped her process ongoing grief while maintaining connection to Michael's memory. She would arrange fresh flowers, clean the headstone if necessary, and settle into quiet conversation that mixed updates about current events with memories of their shared experiences. Other visitors occasionally passed nearby during their own cemetery visits, but the unspoken etiquette of military burial grounds ensured that everyone respected each other's need for private mourning. Dorothy appreciated this courtesy, which allowed her to grieve without interference or awkward expressions of sympathy from well-meaning strangers. The honor guard personnel who conducted ceremonies throughout Arlington followed strict protocols that required them to maintain professional focus on their duties rather than casual interaction with visitors. Their training emphasized respect for grieving families through competent performance of ceremonial obligations, rather than personal engagement that might intrude on private moments. Dorothy had observed dozens of these ceremonies during her weekly visits, developing deep appreciation for the precision and dignity that characterized military funeral traditions. The guards' attention to detail in folding flags, presenting honors, and coordinating with military chaplains reflected institutional commitment to honoring service members regardless of rank or circumstances of death. Her own interaction with cemetery staff remained minimal and professional. She signed visitor logs when required, complied with security procedures, and maintained the quiet demeanor expected in such sacred spaces. Her behavior created no concerns that would draw additional attention from security personnel who monitored the grounds for inappropriate activities. The faded patch on her jacket shoulder attracted no notice from guards whose attention focused on potential security threats rather than analyzing visitors' clothing for military insignia. The patch itself was small and indistinct, easily mistaken for a decorative element or commercial logo rather than official military identification. Dorothy's background remained unknown to cemetery personnel who processed her visits as routine administrative matters. Her visitor file contained no information about military service, federal employment, or other details that might indicate connections to defense communities beyond her role as a Gold Star mother grieving her son's sacrifice. The conversations she conducted at Michael's gravesite were private monologues that no one else could overhear. She would update him on current events, share memories of his childhood, and discuss the challenges of adjusting to life without his presence. These one-sided conversations provided emotional comfort, while maintaining her connection to someone whose loss had fundamentally altered her daily existence. Her weekly routine had become part of Arlington's invisible community of regular visitors whose presence contributed to the cemetery's atmosphere of continuing remembrance and honor. Staff members recognized her face without knowing her name, understood her schedule without tracking her specific movements, and respected her grief without requiring detailed explanations of her relationship to military service. The small patch on her jacket remained as unnoticed as her personal history, both hidden in plain sight among the thousands of details that characterized daily operations at one of America's most sacred military installations. Staff Sergeant Anthony Rivera had been assigned to Arlington's Honor Guard detail for 8 months, long enough to recognize the rhythm of daily ceremonies and the patterns of regular visitors who maintained schedules around their loved ones' graves. His duties included coordinating funeral services, managing ceremonial equipment, and ensuring that military protocols were executed with the precision that bereaved families deserved during their most difficult moments. Rivera noticed Dorothy during his 3rd week at Arlington, initially because she arrived with such consistent timing that her presence had become part of the Tuesday morning landscape in Section 7. Her respectful behavior and obvious familiarity with military cemetery etiquette suggested someone who understood the significance of the location and the importance of maintaining appropriate decorum. The Honor Guard training had emphasized situational awareness as both a security measure and a mark of professional competence. Rivera's observation skills had been sharpened through months of managing complex ceremonies where multiple family groups, military units, and civilian officials required coordination without apparent effort or visible stress. Dorothy's weekly visits provided a stable reference point in the constantly changing environment of military funerals and memorial services. While other visitors arrived sporadically or only during significant dates, her consistent presence created a sense of continuity that Rivera found oddly comforting during his own adjustment to the emotional demands of cemetery duty. Her behavior during nearby ceremonies caught Rivera's professional attention because she demonstrated understanding of military protocols that exceeded typical civilian knowledge. She would pause her personal activities when funeral processions passed, stand at respectful attention during flag presentations, and time her movements to avoid interfering with ceremonial activities. Most civilian visitors required gentle guidance from Honor Guard personnel to understand appropriate behavior during military ceremonies. Dorothy's intuitive compliance with unwritten rules suggested either extensive military family background or personal experience with military protocols that went beyond her apparent role as a grieving mother. Rivera began observing her interactions with other visitors and cemetery staff, noting subtle details that distinguished her from the typical family members who sought comfort at Arlington. Her situational awareness exceeded normal civilian levels, evidenced by her ability to navigate the complex cemetery layout without maps or assistance, and her recognition of different military units conducting services. During one particularly emotional ceremony for a young Marine, Rivera noticed Dorothy maintaining perfect military bearing while other civilian observers showed varying degrees of composure. Her posture and facial expression reflected disciplined control that suggested training in managing emotional responses during formal military functions. The small patch on her jacket began attracting Rivera's curiosity, though its faded condition and positioning made detailed examination impossible from his duty positions. Military training had taught him to identify unit patches, service ribbons, and other insignia that indicated background and experience levels, but Dorothy's patch remained too indistinct for accurate assessment. Rivera's experience with veteran families had taught him that military service often influenced entire family systems in ways that shaped behavior, values, and understanding of military culture. Dorothy's comfort level with Arlington's environment suggested connections to military service that extended beyond her relationship to her deceased son. Her conversations with other visitors revealed knowledge of military terminology, deployment schedules, and overseas operations that indicated either extensive research about her son's service or personal familiarity with military life. She would occasionally offer quiet words of comfort to other families that demonstrated understanding of military loss that seemed deeper than secondhand knowledge. The timing of Dorothy's visits coincided with periods when honor guard details conducted training exercises between scheduled ceremonies. Rivera observed her apparent interest in these training activities, noting that her attention focused on technical aspects of drill movements and ceremonial procedures rather than casual observation. Her posture during flag ceremonies suggested muscle memory responses that contradicted her civilian appearance. Rivera noticed subtle movements that paralleled military bearing, slight adjustments in stance, automatic hand positioning, and facial expressions that reflected trained responses to formal military protocols. Other honor guard personnel began commenting on Dorothy's presence, initially because her consistent schedule made her a recognizable figure, but gradually because various details about her behavior suggested something beyond typical civilian background. Conversations among the Guard members included speculation about her possible military connections. Corporal Janet Wu, who managed visitor coordination for Section 7, mentioned that Dorothy's completion of security procedures reflected familiarity with military processing that exceeded normal civilian experience. Her documentation was always perfectly organized, her responses to security questions were precise, and her understanding of restricted areas was remarkably accurate. Rivera's growing curiosity about Dorothy's background was tempered by professional respect for privacy and the understanding that Arlington served families who might have complicated relationships with military service that required discreet handling. His observation remained passive, driven by professional interest rather than investigative intent. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The patch on Dorothy's jacket became a minor obsession for Rivera, who found himself trying to catch better views during her visits without appearing to scrutinize her appearance. His military training and insignia recognition made the unidentifiable patch particularly frustrating, especially since other aspects of her behavior suggested significant military connections. During quiet moments between ceremonies, Rivera would discuss his observations with other honor guard members who had developed similar curiosity about Dorothy's background. Their consensus was that she possessed knowledge and bearing that exceeded typical military family member experience, but her civilian status and apparent age made speculation about her possible service record seem unlikely. The mystery of Dorothy's true background had become an unofficial topic of conversation among honor guard personnel who respected her privacy, while acknowledging that something about her presence at Arlington suggested a story more complex than appeared on the surface. Dorothy's weekly visits to Michael's grave had evolved beyond simple morning rituals into something resembling mission briefings that she conducted with military precision. Her canvas bag contained more than flowers and coffee. Tucked beneath personal items were meticulously organized notes about Arlington's operational procedures, security protocols, and staffing patterns that she had observed during 18 months of careful attention. Her notebook documented the timing of honor guard rotations, the coordination procedures for multiple ceremonies, and the logistics challenges that cemetery staff managed daily. These observations weren't driven by curiosity, but by professional instincts that had never fully retired, despite decades away from active service. During conversations with Michael's headstone, Dorothy would update him on her assessment of current military protocols, comparing what she observed at Arlington with procedures she remembered from her own service years. Her analysis revealed significant improvements in ceremonial standards, equipment maintenance, and personnel training that impressed her despite personal grief over the circumstances requiring such expertise. The small composition book she kept contained detailed sketches of Arlington's layout, including restricted areas, security checkpoints, and optimal routes for emergency evacuation procedures. Her architectural observations reflected training in facility assessment that went far beyond civilian knowledge, encompassing structural vulnerabilities, communication networks, and personnel deployment patterns. Dorothy's background in strategic planning manifested through systematic analysis of Arlington's operational efficiency. She noted staffing levels during different seasons, identified potential bottlenecks during high-volume ceremony periods, and recognized resource allocation patterns that indicated budgetary constraints affecting service quality. Her professional assessment of honor guard performance revealed both strengths and areas requiring improvement. She documented instances of exceptional individual performance, noted coordination problems between different service branches, and identified training gaps that affected ceremonial precision during complex multi-service funerals. The technical specifications she recorded included details about ceremonial equipment, communication systems, and transportation logistics that supported daily operations. Her observations encompassed everything from flag folding techniques to rifle maintenance procedures, demonstrating familiarity with military standards that exceeded casual observation. Dorothy's analysis extended to security vulnerabilities that most visitors would never notice or understand. She identified sightlines that could compromise protection protocols, assessed perimeter security during high-profile ceremonies, and noted access control weaknesses that could potentially be exploited by hostile actors. Her documentation included psychological profiles of key personnel, analyzing leadership styles, stress responses, and decision-making patterns that affected operational effectiveness. These assessments reflected training and personnel evaluation that had been refined through decades of military experience in challenging environments. The weather data she tracked served dual purposes, honoring Michael's memory by visiting regardless of conditions while maintaining operational awareness of how environmental factors affected cemetery operations. Her notes included wind patterns that influenced flag ceremonies, temperature effects on equipment performance, and precipitation impacts on ceremonial scheduling. Dorothy's tactical awareness extended to crowd management during national holidays and memorial observances, when Arlington hosted thousands of visitors simultaneously. She analyzed traffic flow patterns, identified potential congestion points, and assessed emergency response capabilities during peak attendance periods. Her observations of visiting dignitaries and their security details revealed understanding of protection protocols that suggested experience with high-level security operations. She could identify different federal agencies based on personnel deployment patterns, communication equipment, and coordination procedures. The maintenance schedule she tracked included everything from groundskeeping activities to facility repairs that affected daily operations. Her attention to these details reflected appreciation for logistical complexity that supported Arlington's mission while recognizing budget constraints that limited optimal resource allocation. Dorothy's assessment of inter-service cooperation during joint ceremonies revealed diplomatic skills and understanding of institutional rivalries that affected military effectiveness. Her analysis included recommendations for improving coordination between Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps personnel during shared responsibilities. Her documentation of family interactions with honor guard personnel reflected understanding of grief counseling techniques and crisis management that suggested training in psychological support operations. She noted effective communication strategies while identifying missed opportunities for providing better assistance to bereaved families. The intelligence gathering skills she employed were subtle but systematic, encompassing everything from personnel background research to operational pattern analysis. Her methods reflected professional training and information collection that remained sharp despite retirement from active service decades earlier. Dorothy's evaluation of Arlington's role in national security included analysis of symbolic importance, propaganda value, and potential targets for hostile action. Her assessment revealed understanding of asymmetric warfare concepts and homeland security vulnerabilities that exceeded civilian knowledge levels. Her notes contained contingency planning scenarios for various emergency situations that could affect Arlington's operations. These plans addressed everything from natural disasters to security threats, demonstrating strategic thinking capabilities that suggested extensive emergency management experience. The communication analysis she conducted included evaluation of coordination between Arlington staff and external agencies during special events. Her understanding of interagency cooperation revealed knowledge of federal bureaucracy that indicated previous involvement in government operations at significant levels. Dorothy's professional assessment of current military capabilities compared to historical standards reflected intimate familiarity with institutional evolution over multiple decades. Her analysis included technological improvements, procedural refinements, and cultural changes that had shaped modern military effectiveness. Her systematic documentation served multiple purposes beyond personal grief processing. The information represented a comprehensive operational analysis that could provide valuable insights for improving Arlington's efficiency while honoring its sacred mission of military remembrance. The notebook remained her private project, shared only with Michael during their weekly conversations that mixed personal memories with professional observations about the military institution they had both served with distinction. The crisis began on a humid Thursday morning when Arlington's communication system experienced catastrophic failure during the funeral service for General Patricia Hawthorne, a ceremony that required coordination between multiple federal agencies, international delegations, and media representatives from around the world. The breakdown occurred precisely when flawless execution was most critical. Master Sergeant Kevin O'Brien, Arlington's senior operations coordinator, faced the nightmare scenario that emergency planning had identified, but hoped never to encounter. Primary communication networks were down, backup systems were experiencing intermittent failures, and coordination between security details had collapsed into dangerous confusion. The ceremony for General Hawthorne represented the highest-profile military funeral Arlington had conducted in over 2 years. Her distinguished service record had attracted dignitaries from NATO allies, Department of Defense leadership, and congressional delegations whose security requirements created overlapping jurisdictions that demanded precise coordination. Rivera found himself managing honor guard positioning without reliable communication to other units, creating potential security gaps that could compromise the safety of high-value attendees. The ceremonial precision that characterized Arlington's reputation was disintegrating in real time as personnel struggled to maintain protocol without adequate information sharing. O'Brien's attempts to implement backup communication procedures revealed systemic vulnerabilities that previous emergency drills had failed to identify. Equipment compatibility issues between different agencies prevented effective coordination, while improvised solutions created new problems that multiplied throughout the operational chain. The timing of the system failure coincided with peak complexity as multiple ceremonial elements required simultaneous coordination. Flag presentations, rifle salutes, musical honors, and dignitary protocols needed precise synchronization that became impossible without functional communication networks. Security concerns escalated as protective details for various dignitaries began implementing independent protocols that conflicted with overall ceremony management. The lack of centralized coordination created confusion about movement patterns, access controls, and emergency response procedures that threatened to derail the entire service. Dorothy observed the developing crisis from her position near Michael's grave, recognizing the signs of communication breakdown through subtle indicators that most civilian observers would miss. Personnel movements reflected improvisation rather than planned coordination. Equipment deployments showed confusion about assignments, and facial expressions revealed growing stress among ceremonial leadership. The media presence amplified pressure on Arlington staff, who understood that any visible failures during such a high-profile ceremony would damage the institution's reputation while dishonoring General Hawthorne's distinguished service record. International attention meant that operational problems could have diplomatic implications beyond immediate ceremonial concerns. O'Brien's coordination efforts were hampered by conflicting information from various agencies whose standard operating procedures weren't designed for the complex interagency cooperation that Arlington ceremonies required. Each organization brought different communication protocols, security requirements, and command structures that created administrative chaos. Rivera coordinated with his honor guard team using hand signals and predetermined procedures, but the lack of real-time communication with other ceremony elements created timing problems that threatened the dignity of military funeral traditions. Their training hadn't prepared them for managing such extensive coordination failures during critical operations. The backup generators supporting essential systems began showing signs of strain under increased demand from improvised communication attempts. Technical personnel struggled to maintain power stability, while ceremony staff implemented manual procedures that couldn't match the precision of properly functioning automated systems. Weather conditions added complications as afternoon thunderstorms approached Arlington, creating time pressure for completing outdoor ceremonial elements before potential safety concerns would require modifications to established protocols. The combination of technical failures and environmental challenges pushed operational stress beyond normal management capabilities. Dorothy's professional assessment of the crisis revealed that Arlington's emergency procedures had been designed for single-point failures rather than the cascade of system breakdowns currently affecting multiple operational areas simultaneously. The complexity exceeded contingency planning that hadn't anticipated such comprehensive coordination collapse. International delegates began expressing concerns about ceremony delays that could affect their scheduled departures and diplomatic commitments. The visible confusion among Arlington staff was creating embarrassment that threatened to overshadow the solemn purpose of honoring General Hawthorne's military achievements. O'Brien contacted his superior officers for guidance, but communication problems prevented clear understanding of available options or authorization for implementing emergency alternatives. The chain of command that normally provided decisive leadership was fragmented by the same system failures affecting operational coordination. The honor guard units responsible for flag folding and presentation were operating without confirmation that their timing aligned with musical honors, creating potential for ceremonial errors that would be visible to thousands of attendees and millions of television viewers watching the nationally broadcast service. Security screening procedures for late-arriving dignitaries were compromised by database access problems that prevented verification of credentials through normal channels. Personnel were forced to implement manual processing that created delays while potentially compromising safety protocols. Dorothy recognized that the crisis required immediate intervention by someone with comprehensive understanding of both ceremonial requirements and emergency management procedures. The complexity exceeded the capabilities of personnel whose training focused on normal operations rather than crisis response under such challenging conditions. The reputation of Arlington National Cemetery hung in the balance as staff struggled to maintain dignity and precision during circumstances that threatened to transform a solemn military tribute into a visible demonstration of institutional failure. The honor due to General Hawthorne and the expectations of grieving families required solutions that conventional procedures couldn't provide. Time was running out as ceremony elements fell further behind schedule, creating pressure for decisive action that could either salvage the situation or compound the existing problems into permanent damage to Arlington's ceremonial standards. Dorothy approached the overwhelmed honor guard detail with quiet determination, carrying her notebook and moving with purpose that contrasted sharply with the confusion surrounding the deteriorating ceremony. Rivera noticed her approach first, initially concerned that a civilian visitor might interfere with their desperate attempts to salvage the General Hawthorne service. "Sergeant, your communication relay is positioned incorrectly for optimal signal coverage," Dorothy said calmly to Rivera, her voice carrying authority that seemed inconsistent with her apparent civilian status. "Move your backup transmitter 15 degrees north and elevate it 2 feet. You'll regain contact with the main command post." Rivera stared at her in bewilderment, unsure how a grieving mother could possess technical knowledge about military communication equipment. Her suggestion was specific enough to suggest genuine expertise, but her civilian appearance and presence at her son's grave created confusion about whether to accept advice from an unauthorized source. O'Brien overheard Dorothy's recommendation while coordinating with security personnel nearby. His desperation to resolve the communication crisis overcame protocol concerns about civilian involvement in military operations. "Ma'am, how do you know about our equipment positioning?" Dorothy opened her notebook to reveal detailed diagrams of Arlington's communication infrastructure, complete with technical specifications and optimization recommendations that demonstrated comprehensive understanding of military systems. The sketches showed antenna patterns, signal interference sources, and equipment placement strategies that exceeded anything in official Arlington documentation. "Your primary relay station has been compromised by electromagnetic interference from the mobile command units," Dorothy explained, pointing to specific locations on her hand-drawn maps. "The backup frequencies are being blocked by atmospheric conditions interacting with your antenna configuration. Standard protocols don't account for this combination of factors." Quote, Rivera followed her recommendations and immediately established clear communication with the command post, ending 30 minutes of operational chaos. The restoration of coordination allowed the honor guard to resume proper ceremonial procedures, just as the most critical elements of General Hawthorne's service were scheduled to begin. O'Brien examined Dorothy's notebook more carefully, discovering analysis of Arlington's operational vulnerabilities that surpassed official emergency planning documents. Her recommendations included solutions for crisis scenarios that emergency management staff hadn't considered, written in technical language that indicated extensive experience with military systems. "Ma'am, this is detailed threat assessment and contingency planning," O'Brien observed with growing amazement. "Where did you acquire this level of operational knowledge about Arlington's infrastructure?" Dorothy's response was interrupted by Corporal Wu approaching with obvious urgency. "Sergeant O'Brien, we've got another problem." The dignitary security detail is requesting immediate evacuation routes due to incoming severe weather, but our coordination with Secret Service has been compromised by the communication failures. Dorothy glanced at the approaching storm clouds, then consulted her notebook for weather contingency procedures she had developed during months of observation. Implement Modified Protocol 7. Move the ceremony to the Memorial Amphitheater. Dignitary security can maintain protection while completing essential elements indoors. O'Brien looked confused. Ma'am, we don't have a Modified Protocol 7 in our emergency procedures. You do now, Dorothy replied, tearing pages from her notebook that contained detailed evacuation procedures, timing coordination, and resource allocation plans for exactly this type of weather emergency. Her documentation included alternative routes, equipment positioning, and personnel assignments that could preserve ceremonial dignity while ensuring safety. Rivera studied the evacuation plans while coordinating their implementation through newly restored communication networks. The procedures demonstrated understanding of Arlington's layout, security requirements, and ceremonial protocols that exceeded the knowledge base of personnel who worked there daily. Wu coordinated with various agency representatives, using Dorothy's recommendations, finding that her contingency planning addressed interagency cooperation problems that had plagued previous emergency responses. Her procedures included specific coordination protocols for different federal agencies that reflected intimate knowledge of bureaucratic operations. The ceremony transition proceeded with remarkable efficiency as Arlington staff implemented Dorothy's emergency procedures. General Hawthorne's service was completed with dignity despite challenging circumstances, maintaining the solemn honor appropriate for her distinguished military career. O'Brien approached Dorothy after the successful ceremony conclusion, carrying her notebook and wearing an expression of professional bewilderment. Ma'am, these procedures are more comprehensive than our official emergency planning. This represents months of systematic analysis and strategic thinking. Dorothy's jacket had shifted during the crisis response, making the small patch on her shoulder more visible to Rivera's trained eye for military insignia. The faded emblem was partially obscured, but certain design elements triggered recognition that made him examine it more carefully. Sergeant Rivera, look at this patch, Rivera called O'Brien's attention to Dorothy's jacket shoulder. Can you identify this unit designation? O'Brien studied the worn patch, noting design elements that seemed familiar but couldn't immediately be placed within his knowledge of military insignia. The patch showed signs of age and wear that suggested decades of service, but the specific unit identification remained unclear. Dorothy noticed their attention to her jacket and automatically adjusted her posture, revealing military bearing that had been hidden beneath her civilian appearance. The subtle change in stance and facial expression suggested training in operational security that had become automatic after years of professional service. Ma'am, that patch appears to be from a classified unit, O'Brien observed with growing respect. I'm not familiar with that specific designation, but the design elements suggest a special operations background. Dorothy's calm response revealed nothing about her background while acknowledging their observation. Some patches become invisible after you retire from wearing them officially. Quote, the cryptic answer only deepened their curiosity about her true identity and the source of expertise that had just saved Arlington's most important ceremony in months. Colonel James Hartwell arrived at Arlington within 2 hours of O'Brien's secure communication to Pentagon personnel offices regarding Dorothy's extraordinary intervention during the Hawthorne ceremony crisis. His mission involved verifying the identity of someone whose operational knowledge had exceeded classified security parameters during a nationally televised military event. Hartwell's investigation began with examination of Dorothy's visitor records, security clearance documentation, and the notebook containing detailed analysis of Arlington's vulnerabilities. The material demonstrated strategic thinking capabilities that suggested professional intelligence background far beyond typical civilian contractor qualifications. Dorothy was quietly approached near Michael's grave by Hartwell and a discreet security detail, their presence indicating that her crisis intervention had triggered official interest in her background and qualifications. The colonel's demeanor suggested respect rather than suspicion, acknowledging that her contributions had prevented a ceremonial disaster with potential diplomatic implications. Mrs. Kelman, I'm Colonel Hartwell from Pentagon Personnel Security, he introduced himself with formal courtesy. Your assistance during today's emergency was remarkable. We'd like to understand how you developed such comprehensive knowledge of Arlington's operational procedures. Dorothy's response was measured and professional, reflecting awareness that her public demonstration of expertise had compromised the anonymity she had maintained during 18 months of quiet cemetery visits. "I've been observing operations here since Michael was interred. Military logistics haven't changed as much as you might think." Hartwell examined the faded patch on Dorothy's jacket with equipment designed for detailed insignia analysis. The specialized scanner revealed design elements that had been obscured by age and wear, displaying information that triggered immediate recognition in classified military databases. The results appeared on Hartwell's secure tablet, showing unit designation that made him straighten with obvious respect. "Mrs. Kelman, this patch indicates service with the 42nd Strategic Operations Group. That unit hasn't existed officially since 1987. Quote, Rivera and O'Brien observed the interaction with growing comprehension that Dorothy's background involved classified military service that explained her exceptional crisis management capabilities. The Pentagon colonel's deferential treatment suggested that her service record commanded respect at the highest levels." Dorothy's acknowledgement was simple but profound. "Some units are disbanded officially, but their mission requirements never disappear entirely. Strategic operations just become more discreet." Hartwell accessed Dorothy's complete service record through classified channels, reading information that revealed a distinguished career in military intelligence and special operations that had spanned 3 decades. Her assignments had included facility security assessment, emergency management, and strategic planning at installations worldwide. The records showed Colonel Dorothy Kelman, retired, with decorations that included the Defense Superior Service Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal, and classified commendations for operations that remained beyond public disclosure. Her expertise in facility security and crisis management had been developed through assignments at critical installations throughout her career. O'Brien learned that Dorothy's son, Captain Michael Kelman, had followed his mother's path into military intelligence, serving with distinction in overseas operations before being killed in action during a classified mission that had eliminated a significant terrorist threat. His service had honored the family tradition of protecting national security through quiet professionalism. Hartwell explained that Dorothy's retirement from active duty had included assignment to inactive ready reserve status that maintained her security clearances for potential consultation during national emergencies. Her crisis intervention at Arlington fell within authorized parameters for retired personnel with specialized expertise. The validation of Dorothy's credentials transformed her relationship with Arlington's staff, from mysterious civilian observer to respected military professional whose insights could improve facility operations. Her 18 months of detailed analysis had produced recommendations that exceeded official security assessments conducted by contracted specialists. Rivera requested permission to implement Dorothy's comprehensive security improvements on a permanent basis, recognizing that her recommendations addressed vulnerabilities that standard procedures had overlooked. Her systematic approach to facility assessment reflected training and experience that active duty personnel could learn from. Dorothy accepted an unofficial consulting role that allowed her to continue visiting Michael's grave while providing professional guidance for Arlington's operational improvement initiatives. Her unique perspective as both grieving mother and experienced military officer enabled contributions that honored her son's memory through service to others. Hartwell arranged for Dorothy's notebook to be classified and archived as official intelligence documentation, ensuring that her analysis would influence Arlington's security planning while protecting sensitive information about facility vulnerabilities from unauthorized disclosure. The honor guard detail that had witnessed Dorothy's crisis intervention received briefings about recognizing and respecting retired military personnel whose civilian appearance might conceal significant service backgrounds. Her example became a training case study about the value of diverse expertise in crisis situations. Dorothy's weekly visits to Section 7 continued with unchanged routine, but her interactions with Arlington staff reflected mutual professional respect rather than the previous invisibility that had characterized her presence. Personnel understood that they were working alongside someone whose contributions to military service deserved acknowledgement. O'Brien implemented new procedures for identifying retired military personnel among Arlington visitors, creating opportunities for experienced veterans to contribute their expertise to facility operations while maintaining appropriate privacy and security protocols. The successful resolution of the Hawthorne ceremony crisis became a classified case study in emergency management, highlighting the importance of recognizing valuable expertise regardless of its apparent source. Dorothy's intervention had demonstrated that retired personnel retained capabilities essential for protecting institutional reputation and mission effectiveness. Her transformation from anonymous visitor to valued consultant illustrated the military principle that service continues beyond official retirement, taking different forms but maintaining the same commitment to protecting others through professional competence and quiet dedication. The patch on Dorothy's jacket remained faded and indistinct to casual observers, but Arlington's staff now understood that some military insignia represented service that transcended visible recognition, earning respect through demonstrated capability rather than displayed credentials. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.